Hello folks. Today I want to give a very brief review of Philippians chapter 3 verses 12 through 17. Now, in this passage, Paul is trying to encourage the Philippians and us to imitate him. We see that clearly in chapter 3 and verse 17. Brothers and sisters, join in imitating me and observe those who live according to the example that you have in us. Isn't that interesting that Paul is willing to say, follow me as I follow Christ? And those examples that you see around you who are following me and who provide worthy examples, observe their examples and follow them. Paul is trying to encourage these Philippians to imitate him, to follow his lead. Now, what kind of example has he given to these people? Notice verses 12 through 16. I've called this the fourfold plan for spiritual growth. And Paul says, this one thing I do. I want you to imitate me in this, Paul says. Do this one thing. What do you want me to do, Paul? I want you to press on. Press on. Don't quit. Don't give up. That includes forgetting what is behind. Now, we should forget the things that are behind. Past successes, they weigh us down. Past failures, they weigh us down. Past injuries that we inflict upon others, we should deal with those properly and ask for their forgiveness. But also, the past injuries that people inflict upon us, we should forget those. However, in this context, I think what Paul is referring to when he says forgetting those things that are behind are the things that he talks about in the opening verses of chapter 3. I think he's referring to those past achievements of his, those gifts, those achievements that he thought he had under the law of Moses, which qualified him to enjoy a right standing with God. He said, I think about all those achievements I had in the past, and I think about my heritage, my religious history, and I used to think those were positives. I used to think those were credits in my account that gave me a right standing with God. But now I regard them as loss. Now I see them as nothing. They don't contribute to my right standing with God. So he says, I want to forget those things. I want to forget those things that are behind. And then he says, here's what I do. I strain ahead. Now he's using the metaphor of a runner in the Olympic Games. And he says, I'm giving it everything I have. I'm straining in the backstretch to breast the tape, to win the race. The runner who never quits, who puts forth strenuous effort to make it to the finish line. He says, I strain forward to what lies ahead, and I press on for the goal, for the prize of the heavenly call of God in Christ Jesus. Now, what is that prize and what is that goal? It could be heaven. But in the context here, I think the goal he's talking about is the complete confirmation of his life to the life and death of Jesus. He's told us in verses preceding, I want to know Christ. To what extent, Paul? I want to know the power of his resurrection in my life, and I want to know his sufferings. I want to share his sufferings. I want to be conformed to his death. I want to be conformed to the life and death of Jesus. I want to be completely committed and sold out to Jesus. I think that's his goal. And he says, I'm pressing on to reach that goal. So he says in verse 17, I want you to imitate me in this. I want you to press on yourselves to reach this goal, to conform yourself to the life and death of Jesus. Now for application. In my prayer, in verse 17, my prayer for today, I ask God to raise up men and women who would be worthy examples to follow. Men and women like the Apostle Paul, who could say, this is my goal in life, and I'm pressing on toward that goal. But in my prayer, I ask for God to raise up worthy role models for us in the Lord's family. And I notice that many of you who put your prayers on Facebook for this particular verse, verse 17, were much more positive than I was. You were thanking God for the examples in your life that were worthy of emulation. And that got me to thinking, am I just negative? because I don't see those role models around me. Everyone else is positive. I feel like I'm negative. But here's the application. I really don't see a lot of role models that would be equivalent to the Apostle Paul that we read about in this passage. I don't see a lot of Christians who are actually trying to conform themselves to the life and death of Jesus. I don't see a lot of Christians who are pressing on with every effort they have to reach that goal of total commitment to Jesus. I don't see a lot of Christians who are sold out to the Lord. I guess that makes me negative, but I just don't see it. You know, I really think we need to stop playing at church. Now, let me have this rant just a little bit. I think a lot of us may be just playing at church. We're not committed to the Lord as we should be. How many of us are actually sharing our faith with anybody around us? How many of us are suffering for our faith? And Paul doesn't stop there. His plea in this book is rejoice in your sufferings for Jesus. I'm certainly not there yet. I don't feel that I suffer for the Lord. And why do I not suffer for the Lord? Because I'm not completely sold out to Him. I'm not sharing my faith with others, which would sometimes bring suffering and bring hardship. How many of us are like the Apostle Paul in this passage, who even suffer for the Lord, who are sold out to the Lord, who are pressing on to imitate Jesus to this extent? I think we need to stop playing at church, folks. I think we need to take this passage seriously when it says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And so I think our prayer should be, as we apply this text, our prayer should be that God will raise up more people like the Apostle Paul, because I don't see many people in our church families who are like him. And I guess I should pray that the Lord starts with me, right? That I become more committed to Him. That this is my goal, that I become more like the Apostle Paul, and that I pray for God to conform me to the image of Jesus in His life and in His death. So, I hope that's not too much of a downer. I'm just thinking we need to stop playing at Christianity. We need to get serious about it. We need to devote ourselves to become more like this apostle in chapter 3. I press on. I haven't obtained this goal yet, but I press on to make this goal my own, to be more like Jesus. I forget what's behind. I'm straining forward to what is ahead, and I press on for the prize of the heavenly call of God in Christ Jesus. Okay, those are my thoughts today for what they're worth. Thank you for joining me in this studying Philippians. It's a challenging one for me. I hope it is for you too. God bless you.